What happens when the truth is buried so deep even the people who live in its shadow are too afraid to speak? Noah, a simple pizza delivery guy, never expected to uncover a web of lies that could destroy an entire neighborhood, but when he stumbles upon an eviction notice that doesn't add up, he's pulled into a dangerous game of power and corruption. As he digs deeper, he discovers the shocking truth. The family he's been delivering pizza to doesn't just live in the house, they own the entire block. And now someone will stop at nothing to race them. With everything on the line, Noah must confront the powerful forces working in the dark or risk losing more than just his life. Can one man uncover the truth before it's buried forever? The clock is ticking. Noah, a pizza delivery guy, pulls into a quiet, slightly run-down neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It's late afternoon, and the sun is setting, casting warm glow over the streets. As he walks up the driveway, he notices how still everything feels. There are no children playing, no cars driving by. Just an unsettling silence hanging in the air. He rings the doorbell at Mrs. Ellison's house, expecting typical delivery. She answers the door slowly, her expression tired but polite. There's nothing too unusual about her at first. Her clothes are a bit disheveled, but nothing out of the ordinary. The smell of freshly baked pizza fills the air, pepperoni, garlic, hint of cheese. However, as Noah hands over the pizza, he starts to notice things aren't quite right. Mrs. Ellison seems distracted, her gaze darting around nervously as she fumbles with her wallet. It takes her longer than expected to pay, and she seems to be avoiding eye contact. Noah's eyes wander inside, and he can barely make out the dimly lit interior. The house feels colder than it should be, and the darkened rooms give off an eerie sense of something being amiss. Before he can ask if everything's okay, Mrs. Ellison quickly shoves cash into his hands, her voice trembling as she murmurs quick thank you. As Noah steps back onto the porch, he hears strange sounds inside, creaking floorboards, faint whisper of voices, and he notices two men lurking by the fence, watching him closely. Something's wrong. Noah can't shake the feeling that he stumbled into something far deeper than a simple pizza delivery. The next day, Noah drives past Mrs. Ellison's house again, his curiosity getting the best of him. To his surprise, the house is now completely abandoned. The windows are boarded up, and the front door is locked as though it had been empty for months. The once familiar "For Rent" sign is replaced with faded "For Sale" sign, barely visible under a layer of grime. Confused, Noah slows his car, eyeing the place as cold shiver runs down his spine. The neighborhood still feels strangely silent, the air heavy with tension. The two men he saw before are nowhere in sight, but he can't shake the feeling that something is being hidden from him. His thoughts keep drifting back to the eerie vibe he felt the day before. He stops at a nearby convenience store, hoping to find some answers. Inside, the cashier, who's usually friendly, gives him cold look, quickly changing the subject when Noah tries to ask about Mrs. Ellison. Whispering silence seems to fill the room as the cashier avoids eye contact, adding to the growing unease. That evening, Noah does some online digging. He finds news reports about the eviction of Mrs. Ellison's family, but there's something odd about the details. The articles mention dispute over land ownership and how the family was reluctantly evicted by the landlord, but there's no mention of why or how. This only deepens Noah's sense of mystery. The following day, Noah can't let go of the unsettling feeling that's been gnawing at him. His curiosity grows, pushing him to return to Mrs. Ellison's abandoned house. As he stands in front of the boarded-up windows, he notices faint glimmer through crack in the wood, its dim light flickering from the backyard. He decides to investigate, his instincts telling him there's more to the situation than meets the eye. Cautiously, Noah sneaks around the back of the house, his heart racing. The backyard is overgrown, the grass unkempt. Near the shed, he spots a pile of old documents strewn about. His breath catches as he realizes they're property records, old deeds and legal papers. Curious, he pulls a few from the pile and flips through them. One particular document stands out, its deed of ownership for the entire block of land. The realization hits him like a punch in the gut. Mrs. Ellison wasn't just tenant, she owned the entire block of houses, including the one he had delivered to. Shock floods his mind. Why would she be evicted if she was the rightful owner, and why would the landlord evict her when it was her land? Noah's thoughts are interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. He quickly hides the documents in his jacket and makes his way back to his car, his mind racing with questions. As Noah digs deeper into the mystery, he becomes increasingly obsessed. He visits the local courthouse and sneaks into public records, piecing together the history of Mrs. Ellison's property. He uncovers more shocking details. The land was originally part of a larger estate, but series of shady transactions over the years slowly gave control to faceless corporation. Mrs. Ellison's family had fought back against selling their land, but the efforts were always met with resistance. Noah also uncovers troubling connection between the landlord and the corporation, evidence that suggests the eviction was orchestrated by them in an effort to take over the entire block. The landlord had been working as middleman, quietly pressuring the tenants to leave so the company could buy the land and redevelop it for luxury housing. Mrs. Ellison had refused to sell, making her target. Suddenly, Noah realizes the magnitude of what he's uncovering. The corporation's interest in the land wasn't just about money. It was about control. As Noah drives around the block, he begins to see the subtle signs of corporate influence creeping into the neighborhood. Vacant properties, disappearing residents, and more for sale signs. His investigation takes darker turn when he receives threatening message. Stay out of this or you'll regret it. Noah, shaken by the threat, can't shake the sense that he's now in over his head, but his resolve only hardens. He knows the truth is just out of reach, and he won't let fear stop him from uncovering it. The more he digs, the more he realizes that Mrs. Ellison's eviction was only the surface of a much darker story. He revisits the documents he found in the shed, carefully analyzing the contracts and legal papers. One document stands out. Blueprint of the entire neighborhood with secret annotations that detail plans for demolishing homes and replacing them with high-rise condos. The corporation wasn't just after Mrs. Ellison's property. They were systematically targeting every family in the area, using underhanded tactics to force them out. Noah starts connecting dots. The strange behavior of the tenants, the sudden disappearances, and the mysterious men lurking around. The men he saw outside Mrs. Ellison's house were enforcers for the corporation, sent to intimidate those who resisted. Determined to confront the landlord, Noah pays him visit at his office, demanding answers. The landlord, sweating and nervous, admits that he's just pawn in the game, cog in the machine of much larger, more powerful conspiracy. Armed with the truth, Noah decides to take action. He knows he can't do this alone, so he contacts a local reporter who has been investigating the same corporation. The reporter, initially skeptical, agrees to help Noah expose the conspiracy, realizing just how deep the corruption runs. Together, they gather the evidence Noah has uncovered. The deeds, the secret blueprints, and the landlord's confession. Noah begins to feel the weight of his decisions. He's putting his life at risk, but the thought of the corporation continuing to destroy families and take over the neighborhood pushes him forward. The danger becomes all too real. When he notices men following him, watching his every move, it's clear now that the corporation's enforcers are onto him, and they won't hesitate to silence him. The tension escalates when Noah and the reporter meet to go public. Just as they're about to reveal the story, they are ambushed by a group of the corporation's men. Confrontation ensues, with Noah barely escaping with his life. In the chaos, he sees Mrs. Ellison, alive and more determined than ever. She's not just victim, she's been orchestrating the entire fight against the corporation from the shadows, gathering allies and preparing for the moment when she would expose the truth. With the corporation closing in, Noah, Mrs. Ellison, and the reporter know they have one final chance to expose the truth. They decide to release the evidence in a bold, public way, streaming the entire story live on social media, showing the world what's really happening in their neighborhood. They plan to air the confidential documents, the hidden blueprints, and the landlord's confession in real time, hoping the truth will protect them from the corporation's wrath. As they set their plan in motion, Noah and Mrs. Ellison are both aware of the risk they're taking. The corporation has already shown how far it's willing to go to silence anyone who stands in its way. Still, Mrs. Ellison is resolute. This isn't just about her or Noah. It's about the community that's been manipulated and deceived for years. The tension rises as they prepare for the broadcast. Just as they're about to start, they're interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. Men from the corporation. Standoff erupts, and in the chaos they narrowly manage to escape with the evidence. They're forced into hiding, but not before they manage to leak the information online. The world begins to take notice. The truth has been exposed, but the fight is far from over. As the evidence leaks, the world begins to take notice. News outlets, social media, and even local activists rally behind the cause, but the corporation is ruthless, launching full-scale counterattack to discredit the trio. They flood the media with their own narrative, portraying Noah, Mrs. Ellison, and the reporter as delusional and vengeful. The once supportive community begins to turn on them, with neighbors and even some allies backing away, convinced by the corporation's smear campaign. The pressure weighs heavily on Noah. His phone rings constantly with threats, and he feels the walls closing in as the corporation's influence tightens. But just when it seems like all hope is lost, Mrs. Ellison drops bombshell. She was once high-ranking executive at the corporation. She had left years ago after discovering their corrupt practices, but the secrets she learned could bring everything crashing down. With this new information, the trio works tirelessly to uncover hidden clauses in the corporation's founding documents that could legally dismantle the organization. Mrs. Ellison's insider knowledge is their key, and with it, they start building case stronger than ever before. Noah, Mrs. Ellison, and the reporter know their next move could be their last. Armed with the hidden clause that could legally dissolve the corporation, they plan a daring infiltration of the corporation's headquarters. The plan is simple yet dangerous. Gain access to the corporate servers and broadcast the damning evidence to the world before the corporation has chance to silence them. They carefully strategize, using Mrs. Ellison's insider knowledge to navigate the building's security systems. They enter under the cover of darkness, but the tension is unbearable. Every hallway feels like trap, and every shadow seems to hide threat. As they reach the server room, they are nearly caught by a group of guards. Heart-pounding chase ensues, and they narrowly escape into the underground tunnels beneath the building. where they find hidden passageway to the data center. With minutes to spare, they upload the incriminating documents and live stream the entire operation, exposing the full extent of the corporation's manipulation and corruption. Just as they finish, alarms blare and they know the time for escape is now. They race through the tunnels pursued by armed guards with the weight of everything on the line.